Hi, this is Deb Boyce, and welcome back to another episode of The Architecture of Health. This week, my guest is Emily Waterfield-Buttner of Golden Wellness. She's a holistic health coach for hormone harmony. Welcome to our show, Emily.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
I'm excited to have you. We met on Instagram, and the reason I invited Emily is earlier in my health journey, I had upside down ideas about energy and hormones and women's health. Now, I was lucky enough to get off the birth control pill within a year of starting it in my 20s. But until I went through all this journey with having a child of my own and burning out as an athlete, I had no idea how important our hormones are, especially in the long term. For our total health and regeneration. And no one told me fertility is one of the top markers of health when we underplay that culturally and act like we're doing a service to humanity if we neuter ourselves, honestly. So I'm here with Emily, and she's going to start giving us a few foundational hints about what do we look for and what do we do, some practical tips to make sure we're getting our hormones in harmony. So, Emily, first of all, how did you even get thinking in this way?
It sounds like we maybe have like a bit of a similar story, but for me, it was, starting my period around age 13, right? My periods right off the bat were extremely painful, like excruciatingly painful. I can remember my mom driving me to the doctor and just laying on the table and being like, what can we do? And the doctor just saying, part of being a woman. I mean, she has her period. Just start taking Advil a couple days before your period's going to start. So you kind of get ahead of the cramps. So in my head, this was just part of being a woman. It was cramps, it's moodiness, it's acne. It's just kind of like what goes along with it. So then I was 19 and I started the birth control pill. I was trying to avoid pregnancy. I was also promised it would clear my face because I had horrible cystic acne at the time too. So I started the birth control pill. I mean, even the first time I took it, it made me like sick. I remember I got like a migraine and just felt kind of off and everything, but I was like, no, this is the way, right? I mean, when I got on it, everybody was doing it. It just seemed like the norm. It was like everybody had their birth control pack in their bag along with like their gum and their wallet and everything. I just feel like it was such a norm. Nobody really considered any other option at the time. I stayed on it for about 6 years or so. And I literally quit cold turkey because I just got to this point. It was almost like my intuition was speaking up and was just like, it's time to stop. You got to get off this thing. I was having painful periods while even still on the pill. My acne came back. I started getting eczema. I started getting migraines all the time and just feeling crappy in my body. So it was like, I don't know, my body just knew like it was time to stop. I literally quit cold turkey and my periods came back with such a vengeance. My gosh, like the painful periods came back tenfold. I started getting like yeast infections like crazy, UTIs, acne, really intense PMS. My doctor had nothing to offer me. She just kind of scared me into like, you're getting off, don't get pregnant. Like, that was the whole thing, honestly. But I don't even know. I somehow in my brain, I was like, this can't be it. I want to like learn about what's going on. How can I support my body? This can't be the only way. And I think I just went online and was looking for books. I was like, there's got to be some books on this or something. And I got a couple books. I started reading and all these light bulbs were going off. I mean, I'm like 25 at this point and just starting to learn about my body for the first time, you know? I'm like, wow, I have 4 phases in my menstrual cycle. Oh, ovulation. That's the only time of my cycle I can actually get pregnant. Oh, there's this whole like period time frame, before my period starts. And I need to support myself in, these ways. Otherwise, I'm going to get PMS symptoms. So I started reading this. I started implementing some things, kind of just experimenting. This was well before I was in school for becoming a health coach, right? So it's just me on my own time, just kind of making these changes, kind of changing up how I was eating, how I was exercising, the whole thing. And then slowly my period started to normalize. So the cramps, like severity, I would say if it was like a 10, they started coming down more to like a 7 or a 6, the PMS started going away. And overall, it just started feeling more kind of like even keeled, you know? And I'm working at the time with like a bunch of my friends. So of course I'm going into work every day. Like, did you know? Did you know about this about the menstrual cycle? Did you know this about your hormones? Because for me, this was just so exciting and eye-opening. So I'm telling all these women, like spreading the word basically, because I thought it was so cool. So then that kind of led to my best friend suggesting, hey, you've been thinking about a new career. Have you ever thought about health coaching, right? So the pieces just kind of fell into place. I ended up going back to school for health coaching. And that kind of introduced me to the whole world of wellness. And with that came a lot of like experimenting with fad diets. Like I was vegetarian, vegan-ish for a period of time, got pregnant, postpartum. And that kind of led me to like this whole other part of my own health journey. My health started tanking a bit postpartum. Just eating so much cold, raw vegetables all the time in, the middle of like a New York winter. And it just started like my body was not being supported in the way it should have been. So that kind of brought me to realizing these extremes in health are not the right way either and recalibrating where I was going, So then it was like kind of brought me back to the basics when it comes to health and wellness, Let's leave out the fad diets, the tons and tons of products, I love a health gadget, just to be clear. I love the books and like neat little things, but like not being so reliant on it and kind of getting back to those basics, especially when it came to like de-stressing or really simple stuff like sleep, circadian rhythm and being out in the sun. And then I feel like now, like I feel better now. I'm 35 than I did like in my like teens and early 20s, you know? And
Yeah,
yeah,
that
so
reminds me
that's
of one
kind of,
thing that we were talking about just before we started recording, which was I was telling you my periods were so irregular and
mhm.
unpredictable because I was overtraining athlete and undernourishing that for the first time I got really regular pain-free menstrual periods in my late 40s, like mid 40s maybe. You can't market the sun. You have to scare people away from whatever
Yes.
is easy and cheap and foundational.
That don't cost any money. They're really accessible, and that's the stuff that can really make the biggest difference I've found when it comes to hormone health and supporting your menstrual cycle health.
So one question, I know that a lot of women who are still, I'm past menopause. I know a lot of women who are still fertile, who are scared of getting pregnant. Like you said, that doctor saying, don't get pregnant. And yet ovulation is only a certain time. But I remember because I was so undernourished and so underrested and so overexercised that my periods weren't regular enough to predict. So let's just say an example like that. Where do you start?
So when periods are very irregular, I would start by looking at the basics. So I'm asking about like lifestyle and diet. Is this PCOS? So asking those questions too. That might involve, say, if I'm working with a woman like a client, right? Having them go get blood work done, or do they have results from like a Dutch, hormone panel? So we can kind of look at that too. So kind of eliminating, is it a condition or is this a result of lifestyle and nutrition issues that sort of need to be pivoted and corrected from there? And then in addition to that, I'm always teaching my clients how to track their cycle, and not with an app. I'm really old school. I really like to do it the old-fashioned way. There's just something about putting pen to paper and sitting there every morning and physically recording what are you experiencing, what are your symptoms, um, observing your cervical fluid or even your period fluid, and keeping track of all of that. Yes, there are apps where you can input all this and that makes it easier. We always go the paper route at first, but just learning your cycle in that way right? And then determining, are you ovulating every cycle, right? Or are you not? And learning how to predict when ovulation is going to happen. So you can start kind of, you know, learning your body and learning your cycle, essentially.
Right. And when you talk about what you're tracking, because in some communities, they do a lot of body temperature tracking to tell about your metabolic health. And, that's also a reflection of your thyroid health, all sorts of, and it's all hormones, right? At the end of the day,
Mhm.
it's all hormones. What part does a tool like body temperature tracking have to do?
So tracking your cycle with the chart is it's literally all based on your temperature, your basal body temperature. So it's first thing in the morning before you get out of bed, you're putting a thermometer in your mouth, you're letting it warm up for a couple minutes, and then you're getting that recording, right? And then you're plotting it on the graph. So it's like a bunch of numbers at the top of a like a fertility awareness chart, right? And you're plotting where, wherever your temperature is lying. So pre or preluteal phase, your temperatures are going to be on the lower end, right? Ideally around 97.4. We talked about this before, right? If they're really low, like in the 96 range, that's a good sign. We want to start, working on thyroid health. It's a sign that your body is sort of conserving energy, right? Because maybe you're not intaking enough energy. Maybe you're expending too much. Is there too much stress? Things like that. So we want to see those temps ideally around 97.4. And then after we ovulate, you want to see those temperatures rise. So they're going to go up a bit, right? So we're looking around, like, I like to see like 98.3-ish and above, right? Those are good temperatures for the luteal phase. And the reason that we see that increase is because once you have ovulated, the body starts producing progesterone, and that's like a heat-inducing hormone, right? So the presence of progesterone is going to show up on your chart because your temperatures rise. So it's a great way to, number one, confirm that you've ovulated, which is hugely important. Like you were saying before, for when it comes to like our hormones, fertility, ovulating every single month. I mean, that's like one of the most basic. It's like the fifth vital sign they call your period the fifth vital sign, but I'm like ovulation truly is really the fifth vital sign. We don't have a true period unless we ovulate, right? So, it confirms ovulation, but it also is going to let you know that you are making progesterone. And depending on how high those temps go, can kind of let you know how well your body is producing progesterone too. And then the cool bit is you can then know when your period is coming, because then you're charting. The temperature will start to decrease again. So once that happens, you'll know your period's likely starting in 12 to 48 hours. So you can kind of prep for your period at that point. Okay, temps are coming down again. That's the sign that like hormones are falling. When hormones fall, get to their lowest point, that's when the endometrial lining starts to shed. That's your period. So it's just a really cool way to read your body. I think it's fascinating to be able to take information like basal body temperature and like plot it on a chart and be able to kind of have a readable version of what's going on internally.
And what are the interrupters? Like, let's suppose someone they've been charting they know what's going on, or every time the moon is full, they get their
Mhm.
quote moon, the moon is
Mhm.
full, get your moon, and then it's it, it's an irregularity. And what
Yeah.
kind of things? Because that's what I would imagine that's what, besides the prescription drug side effects that the doctors are marketing as a reason to sell the birth control pills, uh, the way it's all being marketed. But the authentic desire is most likely not to get pregnant. So when is it that there are these unpredictable bumps? Like what causes things to change and a woman to not be able to get an accurate read?
I love that question. It just comes up so much in practice, and I like it because it's such a great opportunity for learning and further understanding about how our lifestyle and routine affects our hormones and how we can physically see that when we are tracking our cycle, right? So, like, if your cycle, say, remains regular, but say you're charting and there's a temperature that's like way higher than the others, right? you can go back in and like you just look, okay, what was happening the day before? Was there something extreme stress, stress related that happened, right? Did you miss a meal, like skip some meals or something? Did you get terrible sleep? Were you out drinking? Did you stay up really late, right? If you wake up a couple hours before you're getting up, say to go to the bathroom, that's going to change your basal body temperature in the morning. So it's neat because you can kind of look and go in and say, hey, why was my temp off that day or for a couple days? Or travel is another one that can throw things off. So it's great because you can record those things. Like, yeah, I stayed up late tonight. I was hanging out with friends. Like, that's life. It happens, right? Or there's some stress. You can see how it's physically like affecting your cycle. In the same sense, this can also delay ovulation. So our body's pretty susceptible to stress. So if there's a lot of stress going on, the body's going to hold off ovulating, right? Reproduction is one of those first systems that'll kind of get put on pause along with digestion, if the body's perceiving a lot of stress right now, like, hey, it's not necessary for us to reproduce right now, like we're going to focus on survival instead. So the body will pause ovulation until it feels it's safe enough to ovulate, right? So if you have a lot of stress going on in your life and you notice, say you always ovulate on day 14, right? You notice it's a few days off, go back in and see what was happening, in the follicular phase or even, cycle before that could have led to that, right? So it's always going in and, looking at your lifestyle, blood sugar balance, how you're eating, all these kinds of factors come together to create different forms of stress that the body perceives. And that in turn can affect what's happening with your cycle. Like your body's always on your side, right? It's always
I
trying
love,
to
yes.
protect you and it's always trying to get back to a place of harmony, but we can also take steps to support it. So it's not in a chronic state of stress or, like honoring our needs as women to support that hormone balance.
So much there. What you had just said about how our body is always on our side. Our design is so amazing and adaptive and beautiful that we've been sold this idea, like I found with my son's autoimmune disease. We've been sold this idea your body's attacking itself. No, no, our body is in a state of toxemia. Our body's overwhelmed with some man made chemical or intervention or lack of something good, so it accidentally grabs something bad doing its best. And one thing I'm getting from what you're saying is if you this is not for those who would rather gloss over and not examine your lifestyle, that this practice calls into question all of these everyday decisions, that if you're not prepared to eat differently or you're not prepared to look at what's causing your stress. It's the same in kind of the same in movement though. What I love that you're sharing though is you have a diagnostic. You could tell, like
Mhm.
instead of just letting the cycles go unexamined, you start to get a sense of cause and effect somewhere, then you get agency. And it's similar like when I work with my students who are reworking, organically aligned movement, there are a few things that you can just see, like if their foot's crooked, like,
Mm,
oh, I can say, what did you do? Did you just take a road trip? And I can see something about their
yes.
neck or their back. And then that gives them a clue of, oh, yeah, let me start to notice how I'm driving. So you're giving people the tools to map their journey. What are the foundational components? First is this awareness that you're
Yes,
getting
yeah.
tools. Yeah.
Awareness and education. That's like uh always like my first step because I feel like in order to engage in the other foundations of health, right? It's good to know what's going on and to be educated on how your body works and your four phases and kind of what to expect as you're moving through your menstrual cycle. And I think that awareness alone is just huge. I like what you said before. I think you said cause and effect, like in
Yeah.
your journey. And I think that's a great way to put it. So yeah, that education and awareness, first of all. Sleep and rest. That's another one. We need quality sleep. And I think that is something that is declining, honestly, every day, like in just humanity. Our world is just so I feel like making it harder to sleep between just the more bombardment of artificial light And I think in the motherhood kind of area, it's nighttime is this only time where we feel like we have time to ourselves. And this is again anecdotal, but we stay up very late, because we want some of our own, time and space, but that's actually really detrimental, to stay up past, 9:30, 10 o'clock. That's going to be that ideal bedtime for hormone health. Because after that, the body's like, we're staying up. Okay. We get another surge of cortisol. It makes it 10 times harder to go to sleep after that and actually stay asleep. Sleep, I think good sleep is one of the best like gifts you can give yourself, to be honest. Like get a sleep mask, wear blue light blockers at night if you're on screens, like use like dimmer lights at night. Make it so that your body can get good sleep. Like there's so many things within our control in our own home that we can do to help to foster better sleep. And it's just it's such an important part when it comes to hormone health. So getting that quality sleep, that's one of the foundations. The next one is going to be nourishment. And within this, I like to talk about blood sugar balance, which is at like the crux of hormone health. As we're moving throughout the day, we are going to have natural ups and downs. You eat, your blood sugar is naturally going to go up a little bit. It's going to come down a little bit. That's okay. But these huge crashes, right? Where we're all the way up here and we're crashing way down. We're getting the shakes, because we're not eating. We're getting headachy because we are going way too long between meals. So at the very basic level, starting just with please eat breakfast. Please eat breakfast. That's like the biggest one, right? Have that breakfast within an hour of waking. You're going to be making sure that you're including protein, carb, and fat with every meal, right? So if you're somebody who's going from eating, like, say, one meal a day, maybe 2 meals a day, or you're just a snacker on the go, try to get it back to breakfast, lunch, and dinner to start, right? 3 square meals a day. If you need to, this is totally bio-individual, totally dependent on the client, but sometimes we'll talk about snacks between, it depends on your job, like what's going on in your day, but making sure your meals are balanced. If you're just having carbohydrates, you're going to get this, raising your blood sugar. If you're just doing protein, you're going to get a dip. So you really want to try to get that as even as possible and mix those macros appropriately on your plate, right? This is also going to decrease stress, which that alone has a big, big impact on hormone health. I guarantee you, if you are somebody who suffers from PMS symptoms, if you start eating regularly and mixing your macros appropriately at each meal, I guarantee you your PMS will decrease by like 30%, like within a couple days of doing that. That's how easily we are affected by it, especially in the luteal phase. Fun fact about the luteal phase, progesterone raises our metabolic rate, right? So we actually require more calories in that phase, right? This is where that kind of the hangry or like, moodiness can kind of come in the luteal phase. Is it just, oh, it's just me, like, this is how I am before my period, or are you just not eating enough? That's something really important to kind of keep in mind to increase your calories a little bit in the luteal phase. That kind of goes along with the blood sugar.
Okay, so this is kind of like number 3. This is sort of foundation number 3. So we had first was awareness, second was sleep,
rest.
Sleep and rest. Yeah. Third is nourishment. One thing I want to ask about a few of the things that you mentioned. I love that breakfast within 1 hour of getting up when most of us are just grabbing a coffee and not. That's especially bad because coffee then has higher mineral requirements and vitamin requirements. And just when your body needs it, hydration and nourishment the most, it's like a car without oil in the tank.
Yes.
And I love that you're saying the balance between protein, carb, and fat at every meal. This calls into question. I know some people using intermittent fasting to work, switch over to the ketogenic sort of work. Is that one of those fad diets in your book, or are your clients any of your clients doing that?
I've had clients in the past who have come to me doing intermittent fasting and we slowly move away from it and then their cycles improve. There is some research pointing to intermittent fasting being beneficial in the perimenopause and menopause area. I have to do more research on it myself personally to see where I stand on that. But during those menstruating years, I personally am not an advocate for intermittent fasting. I just think it's too much of a stressor. It's
Stress.
unnecessary. You're going like, depending, I guess, on how long you sleep, but likely 10 to 12 hours without eating, while you're sleeping. And to me, that's enough of a fast. When you wake up and you're moving your body and you're doing stuff, you need to fuel those processes,
And
in
think of
my
it, the word
opinion.
breakfast, breaking the fast.
Yeah,
We have a natural fast built in.
exactly.
And what you're saying is we need to be cautious about examining, for what age group, which gender,
Like,
how
yes,
athletic are they are, what are their stress levels, what are they eating when they eat, all sorts of, and it could just
yes.
be, yeah, and we don't really have an answer on that. I will say you talked a little bit about being on an extreme diet or a fad diet like veganism or vegetarianism. My own experience was when I was a vegetarian for many years, didn't realize that that's why I wasn't getting regular menstrual periods, is I wasn't getting easily bioavailable protein and fat and good fat, the good fat.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk a little bit about your point of view about uh let's say what are the good fats and proteins that and carbs that you're pointing people
Oh, yeah.
towards?
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, we were kind of talking about this before. I don't really adhere to any specific diet right now, which is incredibly freeing. It opens up all the food groups, which there are so many merits and benefits to all of the food groups. So there is a lot of I've read so many books on hormones, menstrual cycles. There's so much out there saying dairy is, eliminate dairy if you want to support your hormones, like say goodbye to red meat and all these things, right? This is where I'm going to look and say it, looking more at the quality of it. There's so many beneficial nutrients in dairy. And like one of the biggest reasons culprits for, say, painful periods can be blood calcium levels dropping right before your period starts, right? Well, dairy is such a great source of calcium. So to me, that doesn't make sense to be completely cutting out this food group, right? Especially if we're replacing it with products that are laden with a lot of gums or things like ingredients
That
that
are not simple,
not the most
replacing it with
ideal.
things that are not simple and they're high sugar,
Exactly.
oat milk,
Yeah.
soy milk.
Right. And
Yeah,
oat milk's like the worst for your blood sugar. It's not a good option, you know? And I understand there's people who have a legitimate dairy allergy, but when that's the case, actually is pretty rare. I don't come across that very often in my practice, but when that is the case, like, yes, there are some alternatives that are not bad. But, in a perfect world, I'm looking at animal protein. So like red meat, bison, chicken, lots of different forms of seafood, including like shellfish, salmon, whitefish, like all of it, I think I wouldn't put beans or legumes in the protein category, even though because I was vegetarian one time, I did view beans as like, this is my protein for this meal. But now I look at it more of as a fiber source, right? So ideally, you're getting your protein from dairy, meats from animals or fish, eggs as well. Carbohydrates, the best carbohydrates for your hormone health. Sweet potatoes. I mean, that's like my favorite, right? Potatoes in general are great. So any of those sort of like root vegetables, right? Squashes, all of that. I also like to look at it depending on the seasons as well. So like what is nature offering depending on what season it is where you live? Because I think that plays a big role in it. Like in the summertime, I'm eating way more salad greens, peppers, tomatoes, tons of cucumbers. I mean, stuff I'm like growing in my garden too, right? That's what's available. Now the weather has changed here and it's much chillier. I'm not going for like a cucumber salad right now. I want like a roasted kabocha squash or so, or the sweet potatoes and things like that. And that's going to be so much more supportive for your body. So just kind of keeping in mind what's going on with the seasons. I've found with myself and with clients that often when we're doing this work and we're becoming more in tune with our bodies and our hormones, that your tastes almost get natural. You're drawn towards foods that are going to be more supportive because you're in tune with yourself and not what somebody's saying on the internet or some article you read saying like eat this to feel this way. It's like that's I don't actually want that.
Yeah,
You know,
the
like
funny thing is when we were trying way too hard to be healthy, even though we thought we were being rebelliously healthy, all these fruits, all these pastured meats, all these greens, all these and avoid this, avoid that. And we were got in a fear spiral. The funniest thing with my son is we had gotten so afraid of dairy until COVID came at first the first couple of weeks we were scared because we believed the media, but the
Mhm.
first couple of weeks we were at home and he was playing video games 24/7 almost, and he started to almost only eat gluten-free dairy pizza. He for the first time in his life had a giant growth spurt and a regular body
Amazing.
fat level because he was so de-stressed, and the
Yes.
simplicity and the bioavailability of that much cheese and it was organic or whatever, but it really wasn't that. And
Yeah.
the fact that it was bioavailable, that the animal had processed the milk and the fermentation process
Mhm.
had made it more. So I definitely know bioavailability, and just trying to suddenly eat all sorts of raw foods that our stomach acids aren't designed to handle all that well can be a mistake. Trying way too hard can be a mistake. So that's number
Yes.
3. I love
Mhm.
it. What's number? So we had awareness, sleep, nourishment, and what's number 4?
Stress. So de-stressing, I should say, actually. Um, stress is inevitable. I've grown to the term, just the blanket statement, like just get rid of your stressors, just de-stress. And I'm like, come on, man, that what do you mean by that? Because stress is a part of life. Cortisol is put in a really negative light, but it's necessary for our survival. It's a really, really necessary hormone, It's responsible for like our energy in the day. Like, I mean, there's so much good cortisol does, right? The problem is when cortisol is it's on this constant drip to the point where the body is prioritizing making cortisol over your sex hormones, right? Or to the point where your body's shutting down altogether, like we're gonna stop with ovulating, so therefore you're not having any periods, because cortisol is so high. So de-stressing is definitely, one of the foundations. That's because I feel in the world we live in, there's a lot working against us. So having a way to actively de-stress daily, I think is an important part. It should be part of everybody's lifestyle and routine. De-stressing could look like a grounding, like going outside and standing in the sun and putting your feet in the bare grass, right? Maybe de-stressing for you is reading a book. Is it baking? I mean, I really feel that a de-stressing practice is going to look a lot different for everybody because like what I enjoy is going to be different from what like you enjoy. But I like how I say to my clients, what's something that you do when you're doing it, you completely forget about the demands of life. You get really focused in and you're just kind of having fun, honestly. That's another one of my personal foundations that I include in my practice is fun. And I do feel like fun and stress are related. I feel that everything is so serious. And even with our wellness practices, they can become so demanding and so rigid that we're not having fun. And if we're not having fun, it's what's the point of life, honestly? So those two foundations kind of go hand in hand. So finding yourself a practical way that you can diffuse stress, throughout like at different points throughout the day. Like I said, reducing stress could truly be as simple as you're getting up from work and you're going outside to get some sun for 5-10 minutes. Maybe you're stopping and taking some deep breaths. You're doing something like good for yourself, something fun. Maybe it's self-care. I know women love to do like face masks or things like that, a hot shower. So there's a lot of different ways that we can de-stress, and it doesn't necessarily involve I gotta get this de-stressing tincture or like this thing. It's really in our control.
One thing that you are talking, there are two things you're talking about. One is starting to get compulsive, like these things or these herbs and this supplement and this treatment. And that is a stress wheel on its own when
Yeah.
you're just trying too hard to feel good. And then you get too serious. There's stress in that. But another thing that struck me is I know in myself when my lifestyle was much more packed and I hadn't redesigned around that things that are important like the sun and feeling grounded. I know I would sort of postpone pleasure, like I would like when someone's having a wedding and all the bridesmaids go to whatever hot spring or they go to the Mendocinos to get their massages all together. I think I find the same in the exercise and movement realm, which is we actually are better served by small interruptions throughout the day because every 8 hours our proprioceptors and nociceptors are resetting what is our habit on a muscular and nervous system level. And the idea of these snacks, that's one reason I started my 111-day long challenges. Like 111 days, I just skipped washing my hair. I touched the earth with my feet, or I got up and saw every sunrise for 111 days. They're all tasks that took 1 to 5 minutes max, but I built a little practice around them. Those are much more impactful than me saving up, stressing out. Oh, next month I'm going to take 3 weeks and I'm going to totally de-stress then. Even the research recently I saw around vacations, because I used to think, oh, you need a really long vacation. You need to go somewhere else for weeks and it's not worth the airfare. And I saw recently something like 8 or 9 days is the sweet spot for the
Hmm.
length of a vacation. So the
Makes
idea
sense.
of intermittent interruptions to our stressors, like you said, whether it's a breath, touching your feet on the ground could be in a very short interaction to invoke pleasure or fun and
Mhm.
de-stress. Now, I'd like to shift a little bit towards what are the negative consequences that people aren't aware of with these hormone altering things, whether it's a prescription drug like a birth control pill, whether it's a an IUD, whether and I know of someone when they got it taken out, they had a sudden heart problem. It's a huge change in your hormones, but I want to hear what you have to say, or whether it's even uh yeah, some other thing marketed as helping hormone health. I don't even know about thyroid meds. I don't know. Tell me a little bit about the things that people don't aren't being careful enough about or not seeing that they're causing more stress and health problems.
Yeah, no, it's a great question because that's even sort of just where where my whole business was sort of born from, right? Is that act of me going on birth control kind of just blindly and the repercussions of that in a way. Um, it's like I said before, it was almost like everybody was on birth control when I got on it. And I do feel like there's more awareness now, but every woman I talk to, it's still the first thing the doctor tends to go to, and it's like, I get it. They're not taught this stuff in medical school, right? They're not taught to really ask about nutrition or your lifestyle and to look into that first. Like they're doing what they're trained to do, right? Um, Birth control to me is you're taking these synthetic hormones and there is a laundry list of side effects and it's shutting down your innate rhythm. We're kind of fooled into believing that it's regulating my cycle. I'm still getting a period, right? And that's not a true period because without ovulation, we are not having that true period. And it's really important to keep in mind. So when we have, say, really young girls being put on birth control, like they say they started puberty, their periods are irregular, let's give them the birth control pill. Their body's never even had a chance to regulate. So it's pretty common, say you get your period at like around 13. It's really common for periods to be a bit irregular until hormones sort of settle out. Body gets the message like, oh, we're doing this, okay? And then it makes me sad that the first thing is let's just go on birth control to give us sort of this false sense of regularity, almost like I'm checking the box. Okay, yeah, my period comes every month. I'm just going to check that box, right? Instead of kind of diving deeper and understanding like what could be going on, right? Or in the later years, like say you're in your 20s or something like that, same thing, you're having issues with your hormones, issues with your period. So you get put on birth control. Whereas to me, when your body is sort of sending out these signals in the form of symptoms, like I feel that symptoms are a form of communication from the body. It's like the body's kind of saying, hey, I'm trying to let you know what you're eating isn't working, or hey, you're doing way too much, or hey, you're overexercising. And instead of seeing these symptoms as the body telling us that, we just kind of suppress and let's get on birth control or IUD, any whatever form of birth control you want to, you want to go on, whatever. So to me, it's like this suppressing it, your innate rhythm and this the way the body is communicating to you, whereas you do have an opportunity to dig deeper to support your health, like from the ground up. Like our hormones just dictate everything. Like they are this beautiful orchestra and they play a role in everything in your body, right? And I'm a bit of a purist because I'm like, let's not mess with that. I understand, like, yes, there are cases where it's women go on it for like this temporary bit of time. But if you're gonna go that route, what I always say is please just do your research, right? Look into it, know what the side effects are. And if you're okay with all that, then great, that is your decision. But just be informed about it first before just blindly going on. And like I said before, just know that if you are experiencing those issues with your cycle, 99% of the time it can be fixed, right? So it doesn't mean you're like sentenced to, you just have to go on that medication. Like there's usually other ways around it if that's not what you want to do.
And that alludes to the fact that just any sudden change in your hormones, especially that's from a man-made thing, is risky and that you
Mm-hmm.
need to fully explore. I know I can't say for sure, but I know that there was some research about when moms, what is it, women giving birth, their hormones suddenly changed and there was much more heart instability at that time. So one can then think forward if you start using something like an IUD and you have this sudden change, a chemical change to your hormones, something else is going to happen. And knowing what that is before you decide, let alone what has been, whether there's enough research to really tell, then what are all the other effects when our hormones have been changed by a prescription medication. I had read, and there was controversy around this, so I can't say it's 100% true,
Mm-hmm.
but some research had suggested that women on the birth control pill were picking different, more effeminate male partners because their
I have heard
selection
this.
bias. And then I looked a little deeper and there was some conflicting information, but there was information that was seemed of a larger study was the amount of depression went up in women that went on the birth control pills. So you're never going to get this from your doctor because they don't have time to even read huge
It's a
list, and
big
let
list.
alone, and you always have to think, oh, they have to do that because that's the 1% case. Well, and then how well researched can anything be when it's a drug that only has to go through a minimum amount of very controlled situations? Now, here's one last thing about hormone health.
Mhm.
I'm postmenopausal, I suppose, 57. I was lucky I didn't have hot flashes, hardly any menopause symptoms at all. But I had also been awakened to how much pollution was in my life when I helped my son heal. At the same time, what do you know what perimenopausal, menopausal on this other side? I don't even know what women are doing in the chemical world to manage those symptoms. Do you have any insight about that?
A little bit. And we were saying with this before, so I'm 35. So my group of friends, my audience, my clientele, we're all kind of aging at the same rate. We're moving towards that perimenopause time frame right now. And so yeah, I've been doing a lot more research and reading about it. And I think it's a really fascinating time. I feel like a lot of women look at it as really negative on aging. There's a lot of valid emotion that goes into the conclusion of your periods, right? I think it's viewed also as a time where we're just going to be super symptomatic, right? Gain weight, hot flashes, and we're just going to feel really not great. But I really feel like it's beneficial to look at it in a different lens and to prepare for that time, not kind of going out of your way in this crazy way, like, I got to get ready, but like very slowly over time. Like I would say, start thinking about, it's never too early to start thinking about it, right? Like I didn't know anything about my period when I started puberty, right? If I had known some things, I guarantee you my experience would have been different. So I see perimenopause, which is often called second puberty, as this time where I'm like, cool, I'm going into this much more prepared, and I know there's steps I can take that are going to make that journey way easier.
And to build on, when I learned that the things that help autoimmune disease are the same things that help autism, are the same things that help, it was when I started to run around these various communities, all using the same basic tools to solve what seemed like very different problems. I'm really aligned with all the information you gave us earlier, also applies to this phase of life. For example,
Yeah.
my eyebrows were starting to get a little thin, probably hypothyroidism and menopause, whatever. And since I did my what I got in the sun 77 days in a row, 20 minutes a
Ooh,
day, feet
I
on the
love
ground.
that.
And I could not believe my eyebrows growing back in thicker. So the master hormone being vitamin D that has 27 forms, only one of which you can chemically get, and that cholesterol is the most important ingredient in your body to to alchemize the sun into all these forms of nutrients. It's similar. It's so
Oh
similar.
yeah.
And I hear women much younger than me talking about their hot flashes, and I'm like, well, because I had symptoms of perimenopause a couple of times when I was tanking, like yeah, I would pay attention to those. This is the other thing that you're saying is if we mask our symptoms, it's like driving with a blindfold on. With
Yes.
my son, I was pretty fortunate that his tics, his Tourette's movements were so big that I listened. I had to listen. And then I would be like, "Oh, we were just in a brand new car, the off gassing of the chemicals." And then we would detox, and then we were just like these detectives, like, what is it that's stressing us? And if we had just masked those symptoms, it just gets worse and worse and worse. Oh, even ibuprofen, I'll use it in an emergency, you can't
Mhm.
sleep, so something like that. But uh the
Yeah.
body wants us to listen, and it's got the wisdom if we only give it a chance and the right conditions. That's why I call this show
Mhm.
the architecture of health. If we create an environment, that's where our body can move into health. It's our body is what heals us. It's not the band-aid you put over the wound. It's your own nourishment and your design that thrives. So Emily, I think this is amazing. And you've given us a lot of great immediate next steps that we can take. What are some other resources that you'd like to point our guests to? I'm imagining you offer private coaching, group coaching.
Yeah, so I offer private coaching. So this is for the woman who's looking for a little bit more accountability, and really digging into in a more individualistic sort of way. To dive in together, we work for 3 months and we just really get in deep and really we're getting to know each other. Really like digging deep to like figure out what is the root cause and what's driving everything. And then me sort of the client is doing the work. And I love this because it's not me really making the magic happen. I am just kind of guiding these women in offering these suggestions to sort of rebuild their lifestyles in a way that's going to support their hormone health. And building on into what their existing lifestyle is, right? we were talking about this sustainability, right? That's a big part of my private coaching is to be able to introduce habits, routines, ways of eating that are going to be very easy to continue well after our time together. So well down the road. So like it just kind of continues
Decades.
on.
Decades.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
that's what makes services like ours a little hard to price is because we're really looking at a very different time period than,
Hmm.
let's say I'm even a massage therapist and I can help you feel better for one day. I don't know, 2 days, 3 days. But if you don't change the root habits, the operating system, and the routines, it's not lasting. And a great designer has to really think of the architect of a building like that building is going to be there a long time, just like this architecture. We want it to be around for the long time. I'll put in the show notes your website, which is goldenwellness.co, not
Yes.
com.
Not calm.
And you have golden.wellness on Instagram, which is how we met.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much.
Hey, this was great.